Hello, I'm Maya Lila di Vento. Welcome to Mystics, Muses, and Sacred Sites. I have a guest today here, Matt. We are in Thailand right now, in Pai, and I met Matt through his Worldschooling Hub community organization. And I just wanted to talk to someone who has been doing Worldschooling for a while, because as I'm traveling with my two children, a lot of people ask, what are you doing for education? What are they doing for school? What are they how are they learning? And I've just kind of been unschooling them for a while. And now that we're traveling, for me, it's Worldschooling because they're being exposed to different languages and cultures. And I think that's the best form of education, is travel.
I agree, for sure, yeah.
But I just wanted to ask you, you're kind of the Worldschooling expert, and you have this hub and this beautiful community that you've made that makes it so easy to just kind of come in and have access to different activities and different families and different people who are on the same page. So what is Worldschooling to you?
Well, I think it's like an umbrella term that a lot of people use though. Like for some it's like homeschooling whilst you travel. For other people it's using the world as part of your schooling. So rather than reading about places in textbooks, you get to do it, firsthand. I think for us though, it was more kind of trying to show the kids how the world works from day one. So rather than kind of being sitting in a class, being told how parts of it work and being protected from the other half, it was actually kind of putting our kids in situations where positive, safe ones, but where they could learn and apply, their interests, their the academic stuff they need to know as well. Do it whilst you need to do it rather than kind of wait until you're 16, 18 and then do it.
And so do you guys work with a curriculum, or is it more about, I know you organize crafting events or game nights or, all kinds of different things?
It's definitely a mixture. I think we're unschoolers like you, but yeah, I think it's more, I think everyone kind of finds their own path. I think unschooling as well, everyone uses that term, and some people kind of fear it, thinking, it just means my kids don't get any schooling at all. And I think it actually means you're much more hyper aware of what your kids need right now. So the interest that they have and whether or not they need to do the kind of, the maths and language and all that. I think it's more, picking and choosing at the right times what they need and just kind of nurturing where they're going, rather than where we expect them to go and the pace that we naturally back home would expect them to be at.
And how old are your kids?
My kids are 10 and 6.
10 and 6.
So still young, still kind of at the age where their interests are still kind of bouncing around, especially my 6-year-old. So it's fairly easy at this point. And I know there are families that have got teenagers. So that's obviously a kind of extra level up. But I still think with teenagers, but at that point they were so much more focused on the kind of their real interests that you kind of got a clear path to then teach them. So I think it probably gets easier rather than harder.
Yeah, that makes sense. So have you always World-schooled your kids, or did they start in school?
No, always homeschooled. So we were in the UK up until I think Dana was, what was she? That would have been 8 maybe. Yeah, so, but it's always been a thing for us. I think my life has always been questioning, do I need to work for a company? Can I be self-employed? How can I generate income? And it came to the same kind of conclusion with schools. It was like, well, do we need to move to a catchment area that's good, the best school that we can put our kids in, or should we, is homeschooling an option? And the more you look into these things, the more you kind of realize, there's people already doing it, there's people blogging about it, there's podcasts, YouTube channels, So there are so many people that inspire you to kind of take the leap. And then as soon as you do, and you surround yourself in communities like this, there's so many more inspirational stories and people to meet. And I think it really kind of bolsters the idea that you're doing the right thing for you and your family. So it's made a big difference to our life, I think. Yeah.
And so when did you leave the UK? Was that the beginning of the Worldschooling part?
I think, this time we left for good in 23 in May, but we've kind of done trips before that I now look back as though they were dress rehearsals for the main event in a way. They were still having a base back in the UK, being away for 3 to 6 months. Okay. But it was still every year we would go away for winters at least, and because we were homeschooling the kids and I work online, we realised, I can do both of those things anywhere. So
where did you go?
So the first the 6-month one was Mexico, and that was where we stayed with families in basically living in the jungle in a hotel. That was for 11 weeks, and we went from having a 3-story townhouse in England and living on an estate and kind of living a kind of normal English life apart from schooling, to being in a jungle in a hotel with 12 other families for 11 to 12 weeks I think it was, and just the quality of life was so much better. Even though we were just living in a hotel room, we bonded with so many people that I still speak to all the time now, and I love the fact that it kind of really showed us that there are other ways. There was multiple families with up to 5 kids in some of them, and with teenagers. So the kind of the path for our kids kind of became a lot clearer thanks to meeting them, because then we realised we can actually we can go as far as they have at least. So that was the big one for us. And even off the back of that, when we came back to the UK, we kind of figured, well, maybe we'll do like 6 months away in the summers and then 6 months in the winters, 6 months back in the UK in the summers. And we realised after 2 weeks, like, why would we put ourselves through 6 months in the UK living that kind of English life when we could actually escape full time? So that really kind of sowed the seeds of doing it full time.
Okay.
Here we are.
And then when you left full time, where did you go first?
We went to Turkey first, in Fethiye, because there was already a community there. There was some friends there that were just like, if you turn up, we'll meet you on day one. You can drop straight in. So that really helped us. I think you need at least one family to kind of handhold you into the first place. But from that, like, the world's your oyster really. Then you start to experiment with how long you want to be in one place. Do you need community around you? Do you want to be further away? What does your budget look like? Because that changed massively. I think leaving England, where everything's expensive, we kind of expected to have a fairly high budget in the first place, and then I think it's probably close to half now what it was when we first started, just because we realised we didn't need to get this expensive apartment and rent this car and all those things. So it gets cheaper, I think, especially again because we're constantly learning from everyone we meet all the time. Like all the conversations are, how much are you paying for rent, and where have you been, and what's your budget, and how do you sustain this, and how do you work online and continue to do this? So those conversations are always happening every day.
And I just feel like that's such an amazing, again, like hub of this creativity and thinking outside the box and like figuring, like everything's figuring out how do we live this life of freedom, how do we make this work, how like just that kind of on your feet, figuring out everything.
And I think there's two choices with Worldschooling. I've met a lot of families who just say, like, we've been doing this for 2 years, but we were really lonely, and then we discovered community, and it really surprises me because, we dropped into a community straight away, but we were always aware that we needed friends, our kids needed friends, and not just that, but if we could bring people together, we could learn from them, and we would accelerate the point that we'd be at a lot quicker. I think there are places that we did kind of experiment with going to, like in Bali, didn't really work for us because the setup in Bali, you need to kind of travel everywhere, and there's too many international schools, so a lot of the people you meet just put their kids in a school, even though they're like, we're living the dream in Bali, it's still a kind of school system. So that we were able to kind of jump ship from that one quickly and find what we needed. And Pi was actually the first place we came to where we kind of realised we need community. So I do kind of blame Pi in a way for showing us that community is what you really need, and if you can keep replicating that anywhere you go, then it works that much better.
Yeah, and community is huge, for any human, but also for children, because children need friends. And when you're in different countries where the kids don't necessarily speak English, we found that challenging in Italy and Greece. Like the girls weren't really meeting kids that spoke English, which they would still play with them sometimes, so it's not the same when you can really communicate. Yeah,
and I think my kids as well, they just need a few good friends, and even if they don't see them for 6 months, they're happy with that. Like they know the fact that they're coming back, and because of that, I think it's made families return to places. There's a lot of kind of repeat customers, so to speak, in the communities we have, just because we need the same kind of support everywhere you go. And like we were saying with the template, where you can just drop in and know they're going to be the same thing. We get that with our friends too. If we're all in the same place at the same time, then we know that life's pretty much replicated in each place.
And that's my dream. Like I'm trying to get all my friends now, like move out of the country, move out of the States, and like come travel together, because it's so much more fun when you have either new community or friends that you've known. And like I moved here to Pi because one of my very closest friends has been living here for 6 years, and he introduced me to you. And so there's that synergy too that just makes life so much more enjoyable and easier, and more, not so hard to just drop into some place you don't know anybody and figure out everything from scratch, which is its own adventure. But
it is. But the problem we found was that we would spend at least maybe the first month and a half finding our feet, like finding out where the cheap places were for groceries and the local markets and the best eateries and things. And it was the fact that if you had community, you just plug straight into that, and people would tell you, they'd recommend, oh yeah, we've been to this place, avoid that one. So that's to speed things up, saves you money, like you've got that kind of community feel instantly. So we just wanted to kind of replicate that as much as we could, so that wherever you go, you could drop in and it's going to be the same kind of setup, not exactly the same people all the time, but it's going to be the similar vibe where, you know, all the information you need is going to be accessible quickly.
So so you set up these Worldschooling hubs, correct? And is this under the Bliss Investors umbrella?
Yeah. So I mean, Bliss Investors started because we were in Turkey at the time. And it happened because we were having conversations with everybody, like, how do you sustain this? And, you know, how are you making money? And it was always like, oh, you know, I've got properties, I do Airbnb, I've got crypto, I've got, you know, all these different things going on. And we were always kind of sharing tidbits of information, but it was like, oh, you should go to this blog or this podcast or this YouTube channel. It was, none of them were talking about all of those subjects. It was always like, go to this, you know, property investment one, or this one about crypto, or this one about, you know, Worldschooling. So we wanted to create something where all those conversations could happen in one place. So that's going to be a work in progress for at least kind of adding more content, eventually a podcast, we hope. But while we were traveling, we realized that we still want community. We still want to create communities where there weren't any in the places we wanted to go to. So from that, we realized, well, you know, we've got the kind of the following already and the organizational skills to at least put together a template. And then rather than kind of creating something new in each place, we just replicate that template because people want consistency. They just want to know that if I go here, are you guys going to do the same things as the other place? Because that was nice, that was easy, and people plug straight in.
And so is this your structure in WhatsApp of like the groups?
Yeah, so yeah, for Pai, for Bali, Kuala Lumpur, and Koh Lanta coming later this year, it's exactly the same structure in the WhatsApp groups. And we even use the same kind of logo background colours for each one, so you kind of know what to look for. It's the same Monday, Wednesday groups as well, and sometimes extra groups, but we also make the ability to create new kind of ad hoc meetup. Just, you know, if anybody needs any support in where to do them, or, you know, contacting venues, then we kind of help facilitate that all for free, because that builds more community and more events. And Pi is a good example of that. We do 2 regular events, but everything else is all community based, and someone's found, you know, like kids yoga and a silks class, and so it's other people kind of pitching in and working as a community to create something. But we just give a platform where it's easily accessible, and it's easy to find out how to join as well. That's the big thing.
Yeah. I think Remy told me about you in the group, and then I went to the website and I clicked join the WhatsApp, and then that was it. And then I immediately, I don't remember what it was. I was like, where do I buy a yoga mat? Because I need a yoga mat and I have no idea where to go for a yoga mat. And so I was like, oh, this store. And I was like, okay. And I went to that store and they had the yoga mats. And again, like if I hadn't have had people to ask, it might have taken me weeks or a month to find it. You know?
People have even come to us and said, oh, can we add a free cycle buy-sell group to the WhatsApp groups? Because that's a genius thing. We're always buying things like toasters and lamps.
And then getting rid of it when you're leaving.
If you're only here for 3 months, then why not pass it on to the family? So that's really helped as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And so, okay, so you guys, you left the UK for good. You went to Turkey first, and then Bali, and then Pai?
Yes.
Okay. And then you've also been to Kuala Lumpur?
Yeah, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. We've been to Malaysia maybe 10 times over the last 15 years or so. So it's a place that we know pretty well. It's a good place to go for winter sun, basically. So it was a kind of no-brainer for us. We needed to leave Thailand anyway after doing Koh Lanta, which wasn't one of the Bliss groups, but will be this year.
And where's Koh Lanta?
So Koh Lanta is South Thailand.
Okay. Is that on the beach?
Yes, it's an island. Okay. Yes, very close to the close to Krabi. Yeah.
Okay.
So we realised KL's very familiar to us, and we thought basically, let's replicate it there, because we need to kind of be there for a while anyway. There's at least 2 other families going to be there. So worst case scenario, our kids are happy, some of their best friends are going to be there. The adults have got at least 2 other families to talk to. And then we'll just kind of, we'll put down this template, we'll kind of see if people are interested. And I do find that whilst there are kind of free ad hoc groups everywhere, it's the fact that we've kind of branded this and made it look professional and organised that people really kind of resonate with, because they just kind of go, okay, someone's done all that organisation for me. I don't need spreadsheets and stuff. I can just, you know, register and then join the groups, and somebody will tell me, you know, this is the calendar, this is the webpage, this is how, you know, frequently asked questions, all those things. So I think just replicating that, it's easy for us to admin because it's just, you know, a clone basically. But it's also what people want. They want consistency, because the one thing you've got when you're traveling is inconsistency of where you're going to be, what things cost, and, you know, so just adding that kind of consistent base to start with really helps.
Definitely. All right. So you obviously work online and in online. You want to give us a little background, because I guess we'll go into the how, because a lot of people are like, how do you world school? And I think the majority of people who are world schooling are working online, which, I mean, more and more people are working online anyway, so it's becoming more normal and easier. And even people who have these you know, a typical job in the last couple of years since COVID, like, oh, you can work remotely for a lot of these things. And so where did you start in the online world and where are you now?
I'm lucky really because I was doing website design in the UK for a good 10, 15 years maybe. So my background was always kind of online anyway. So building our own website was a no-brainer. All the registration stuff is me as well. It's quite easy for me to kind of come up with an idea and quickly create something and build upon that too. So I still do a lot of that. I now do artificial intelligence consultancy work and development as well. So we're even kind of incorporating bits of that into what we're doing just to kind of increase productivity and better analysis and even coding as well. So yeah, I would say like one of my strengths is reading the trends that are coming and researching them enough to start building services that I can offer. And fairly quickly I can go back to my customer base and I can even put things on Fiverr and Upwork and other kind of lead generators. So I've got a kind of a risk profile that is, I'm confident enough I can make money online whilst I travel. And even if it fluctuates, there's ways I can jump to the next thing I need. So I do think like this kind of lifestyle is definitely for the more proactive people, just because you need to kind of grab yourself and go. You can't just kind of wait for things to happen.
Yeah. And so what have like the families that you've met, what are some of the different industries? Like I met a therapist who works online, and then I have one of our mutual friends who she's starting to do like mobile nursing here because there's a lot of motorcycle accidents. And apparently if you go to the Thai hospitals, they're kind of gouging foreigners or even like picking off the scabs so that they stay like unhealed longer. So you have to keep coming back and paying 1,000 baht a day. And so she's like, I'm just going to go do the dressings for these guys who've been in these, you know, scooter accidents. And like now I'm a mobile nurse. And so just wondering what are some of the other jobs that you've seen?
I think there's a lot of coaches, I think, but it's partly because coaching is a fairly high ticket item anyway. And then, so how many clients do you really need to have something sustainable? It's fairly simple. And I've discussed this with people. We used to do business meetups as well, and a lot of it was brainstorming people's ideas. And when I asked them what their backgrounds were, even if it was something they thought couldn't be done online or couldn't be done remotely, or we soon picked apart like, well, you've got these skills. You're a people person. You're good at kind of managing people. You're good at organisation. Your background might be in care or something like that. But if you can kind of pick out where there are and you can charge a decent amount. So get yourself 10, 15, 20 clients max, and you probably filled your calendar. That's as much as you can take on anyway. So yeah, there's a lot of that, I'd say. There are still people that do remote work, so they're working for companies, but it really depends on time zones then.
So
if you've got meetings with clients in the UK or the US and you are at least like 12 hours 7 hours maybe difference, it gets complicated quickly.
I think time zones are the worst part of being global.
Yeah.
And just in general, like time zones are such a pain in the ass, and just trying to constantly calculate. And I still get messed up with clients that, time zones.
The big one for me is always be honest. Always tell them I live in Thailand right now. I'm Worldschooling. They'll be interested anyway.
Yeah.
But just tell them this is where I am. Don't expect me to answer emails straight away.
Yeah.
Let's not book any calls that aren't they're going to be like 2:00 in the morning for me. And I think if you're honest from day one, everyone's happy with that anyway.
Yeah, totally. And like you said, they're interested. They're like, what are you doing in Thailand? How did you get there? Maybe I want to move to Thailand.
They're usually jealous, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Why did you decide to world school? And you said you started in homeschooling. So why did you decide to homeschool first, I guess, and then go into the
It was just that kind of mentality of question everything. Like, our school's the best for our kids. What are they going to teach our kids? Does that match up with the lifestyle that we create for ourselves? Because if that's a disparity, we're putting them through school to create a career, but we got to the point before that where we were outside the system, so to speak. We were self-employed. We were traveling, a good 3 to 6 months of the year anyway. So, our lifestyle would need to change drastically to help facilitate a lifestyle that we didn't really want to give them to. And I think, if it hadn't been for the internet, we wouldn't know that any of this existed. It was the fact that you've got things like Facebook and forums and podcasts and things that changed everything, really. Like, you had this base of knowledge that you could question as well and get more information. I think so. I didn't really know what Worldschooling was probably until Mexico, just because that was the first time I've been to a community that called it Worldschooling. Okay. To me, it was just homeschooling, but in another country. So, that's what I was saying earlier. Like, there are versions of Worldschooling, which, you could just say we're homeschooling our kids whilst we travel, then it's back home and we're going to put our kids back in a school, So whether that's Worldschooling, whether, paying for hubs where they have a curriculum and, a schedule every day, is that Worldschooling? I don't know. There's a lot of terms that get pushed around, I think.
Yeah.
these days.
Yeah, it's hard to define sometimes because even in unschooling, there's different levels of unschooling, though that's usually the extreme of like no plan, no curriculum, just living life and letting the child be like, what are you interested in? Like, let's move in that direction. And then the world schooling, yeah, is usually some kind of blend with the travel and maybe unschooling, maybe homeschooling. And so it's a spectrum.
Yeah, I still think like with unschooling, I still think that like it's so hyper aware because you're saying like we're not going to sit you down and do these things day by day. You're so much more hyper aware of you know, are they okay? Are they at the pace that I think they need to be? You know, is it okay to be behind? I would say my 10-year-old is slightly behind on reading and writing, but she still loves to read books now and she's picking it up and she may be like 12 months behind where she would have been in a school, but now it's ramping up. And I think her other skills, just life skills, are so much more advanced than putting her in a school because she's been exposed to the world for the last, 10 years of her life. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my girls being here in Thailand, like they're picking up Thai words from other kids that speak Thai, and they have so much more of a fearlessness and like sense of self because you're in the world and there's a lot of everything's different, and so you kind of have to adjust and get stronger. And
they watch us do the same thing. They watch us, go to a new place, figure out how we're going to do everything. Like it's not just like dad comes home from work and mum picks up the kids from school. It's not that kind of kind of template really. So and that changes place to place. So it's a good thing that they kind of see us in those situations. I think that's how you teach kids how to be resourceful in the world, by just kind of being out there and doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. All right. And I guess another question that people have is like, well, how, like I need my kid to go to school so that I can work. So if your kids are with you all the time and you're working at home, like how does that work? And so how have you made that work?
It's tough, yeah. So I would say like being self-employed and being able to manage my clients' expectations does help because they do know that, I look after my kids, my wife does too, so we do swap. So we have 50% of the time with each, which does work, but it does mean that you're either parenting and schooling them or unschooling and then working as well. So I would say, like my calendar's full pretty much, if I'm not looking after the kids, if they're asleep, I'm getting a few more hours work done, if they're with my wife, I'm getting a few more hours work done. It's a lot of bouncing around. But I've been self-employed, nearly 20 years now, and most of that time has been me managing my own schedule. So I'm very kind of used to having that flexibility of, I can stop work at 2 p.m. and go and meet a friend for coffee and do something and then get back to work and work until 8 p.m. So I've never set an alarm. In the last 20 years, I quite like that fact, so I keep to that where it's just, I will pick my hours and I will relax into the fact that, things will get done at certain times, but they won't get done at other times,
Why don't we go into your favorite things about this lifestyle and your least favorite things?
Okay, I think favorite thing's got to be being sociable. Like that's part of the reason why I help to create these communities. I just love chatting with people. I learn so much, so I'm a bit of a kind of a information freak as well. If I can find out new things about things, learn anything, I love that. So all the meetups we've created and the business meetups too was partly me being able to help other people, but it was also like, tell me about your business because this might be useful for me too. So like just being around people as much as possible. I think that's where you really learn and grow the most. I think if you're by yourself, and you can learn from watching YouTube videos, but you could sit with somebody and have a chat and learn so much more.
Well, and you're being exposed to kind of the extreme of humanity, of these people who are, very curious and very, self-motivated and who are traveling the world and doing this very unconventional life, which you might not be exposed to all of that kind of person from all over the world if you're at home in England.
And it fits my personality of question everything too, because it's like, you're doing something different to me. I don't understand how that works. Tell me more. So I find that's really a healthy thing to just constantly question things. But in terms of like the downside, I guess I think I've spent so many years of my life being in that kind of 9 to 5 rat race way of life, that to have this way of life where you can pick and choose your time and where you're going to be, what you're going to do, the responsibility. There's so much more responsibility. But because choosing to homeschool your kids means the responsibility of their education or not is on you. Choosing the world school means the responsibility of where you're going to live and dealing with all the bills and things that go wrong with apartments and all of that is on you. and then you have to be self-employed, so the responsibility of all the income is on you. You know, you can't take a day off sick, really. You know, so I think for the most part, I enjoy being in that kind of higher gear where I have to have all those responsibilities, but you can't really have a day off from that. That's the thing. You know, you can occasionally go and sit in a hammock for a couple of hours if you're lucky, but for the most part, your brain's going, okay, got to pay the bills, got to do things, got to...
kind of hustling.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's the price of freedom.
Yeah, and I would say everyone you meet is a hustler here. Like, we're all kind of like, you know, finding the next thing, and nobody has got like just one job or one source of income. It's always like, you found multiple things and multiple ways to keep this going. And I think that's the trick, is that if all your eggs are in one basket, then at a certain time, like, things can go wrong. That's the big illusion of living a 9-to-5 life in your home country, is that, I've got security, I've got a pension, I've got this job. Yeah, until the boss makes a mistake and destroys the business, and suddenly you're all laid off, or that happens more than it should, really. So having multiple fingers in multiple pies does really kind of help stabilize things like that. But yeah, it's a lot of responsibility.
And so to close up, is there some like advice that you would, like, say somebody's watching this and they're like, oh my God, that sounds amazing, but I have a 9-to-5 job and I've lived in the same place all my life. Like, how would I even start to fathom being able to do this? Do you have any advice for somebody?
I relate it to like having a baby. There's never a good time. Like, people think, I need to save up. You must have all saved up loads of money and then gone and done it. You know? But it's not like that at all. No. You just have to jump into it. You just have to kind of go, something's wrong with my life. I want to change it, and just do it. And you would find out that the quality of life is higher. The cost of living is lower. Like, you get to be around people all the time that are pushing you to the next level. So your growth is just exponential. So all of those things, like, are not so unachievable. It's not like, in 10 years time, if you work really hard, you'll get to that. It's literally, just jump, do it. Even if you do it for 6 months, with a kind of a view to, maybe Airbnb your house out or something, you can always get back to it. But for the most part, you just jump in and do it. There won't be a right time.
I totally agree with that. Because I've moved out of the country a few times, and it's always just a leap of faith. And it's not like I had thousands of dollars saved and everything was set and like safe. That's not at all how I functioned, at least, and most people I know. It's like, like, you just have to jump.
And it's not a leap but it's not a leap of faith alone either. That's the point of these communities, is that if you leap into one of these communities, you've got 20 other families who will instantly bring you in and will share information and everything, and yoga mats.
And someone gave me a yoga mat. I didn't even need to buy the yoga mat that I found where I get to buy it, because I mentioned that I'm like, I need to get more yoga mats. Someone's like, I got one I don't use here. And I was like, I
think if you took your family traveling, then it can be lonely because it's fast travel. But if you slow down, find one place that has a community, it's so much more rewarding, just because you're not alone. You can do it together.
Beautiful. Yay. So you want to tell people where to find you, your website?
Our website is blissinvestor.com. On there, there's loads of information about different parts of what keeps Worldschooling going and sustaining this lifestyle and digital nomad living. There's also now 4 Worldschooling hubs on there that you can register for. So we've got Bali, Kuala Lumpur, Pai, and Koh Lanta.
Okay, awesome. This channel is called Mystics, Muses, and Sacred Sites. And I just asked you, are you spiritual? Do you have a connection? And you had said that you love science and you're kind of fascinated with that. But then you're about to talk about spirituality. What would you say?
Like I was saying earlier, I'm an information freak. So it's, the idea of kind of learning from all the different sciences and exploring that really appeals. But I would say, like, I'm not a religious person. I would say I'm on the kind of spiritual side of that thing. But it's still like the issues I take. The reason why I'm not fully spiritual is because the people I meet that are what I would kind of class as spiritual, they're usually more closed-minded, just because they've been shown, if you do this X, Y, and Z, that makes you spiritual. So as long as everyone else they meet does that, then we can be friends. Whereas I would say, like, I'm friends with people who are spiritual and religious and atheists and science-based. Whereas I've definitely met spiritual people who are just like, if you join my lane, we could all be friends. So I kind of take issue with that.
And we call that spiritual ego.
And
that's kind of like, and you do see that a lot traveling, especially in these places that you're going, where there's a lot of people who are like very like into the yoga, into the spiritual garb, and wearing all white or wearing the mala beads, which I wear the mala beads. And there's like this almost a costume of spirituality that's then exclusionary, which is the opposite of, like, spirituality is tuning into like the one soul that connects everything, the oneness, So it shouldn't be exclusionary, but when it's spiritual ego, then it's an identity, and then you close off people who don't fit that identity.
Yes. So I am more spiritual than I think, because I'm kind of like, I'm accepting of all.
Yeah, it's very Jesus-like of you.
I have a very low spiritual ego. So.
Yeah, that's good. But yeah, and I think that's a good thing to bring up, because people, I think that the mystical and like a sense of awe and wonder and like the hugeness of reality can be accessed through science. And I think that's like that can be another doorway. But I think it's good to discuss, people who have different experiences of their own spirituality.
But the science that I kind of bring in, digest, it kind of makes me more spiritual in a way, because it's just, it kind of makes you realize how like the actual reality might not be what we see. So this could be basically a dream world. Like we are interpreting this through all of our senses, and we're kind of trying to make sense of it. But if you look into the science, then it kind of makes you kind of realize that this is potentially an illusion. But the issue I do have a lot with spiritual things is that when people try to explain things from a spiritual background, they use scientific words, which always kind of they basically reject science, but use scientific terms. Like frequency is often used. It's always like, you can tap into these frequencies. But like, what do you mean by frequency? Because scientifically we know your body doesn't create frequencies. It might respond to frequencies.
Well,
I wouldn't say creates them.
Your heart, actually, I believe, and again, like I'm not really well versed in that, like the Heart Math Institute. Do you know this organization? So they study the heart, and they have all kinds of instruments for picking up like the bioelectrical field that the heart generates. Because with every heartbeat, you're actually sending off a frequency or a resonance.
But when you say this, like, could you pick it up from this distance?
Yeah.
Or could you pick it up this close?
No. You can pick it up. I think the Heart Math Institute has tools that can pick it up at like, I don't know, 6 to 8 foot like distance from the body, where it is literally a wave of like very, very like minute vibration, but it's still measurable.
Yeah.
So.
But does it do anything?
Well,
Show me the science.
Yeah, I have a good book for you.
Share it with me.
Okay, I'll give you a book to read, because my dad was a science teacher, and I also love science, and I'm more on the mystical side, and I think science has a lot of limitations to it, because it depends on the question you're asking, it depends on who's doing the research, especially with quantum physics, the observer effect, like that's science. So
the one thing I would say is that, like, people don't realize that science is short for the scientific method. Which basically means prove me wrong. It's like, I've created this, now prove me wrong. It's constantly inviting people. That's the whole point of like peer-reviewed things. It's basically, I've created this theory, I've tested it, I've come up with this conclusion, prove me wrong. And people do constantly. Like, science is often wrong because people are proving that wasn't quite right, or it needs tweaking. So I think that's another side of spirituality which I have an issue, or at least the spiritual ego people, is like there is no prove me wrong. It's just like, I am right. So like I would push back against that, I guess. But yeah, like I'm happy to be wrong, because it means I've grown.
You've expanded beyond the limitation. So there's an amazing book called The End of Upside Down Thinking, and it's by this guy named Mark Gober, and he was like an economist or something, or he worked in like the tech startup world in Silicon Valley. And he, I don't remember his exact story, but he kind of had some kind of either something awful happened to him or whatever, but had this awakening and started just kind of got obsessed with research, like science around spirituality, and how a lot of actual like replicable good science is done that proves things are real, like psychic capacities and awareness, and like near-death experiences. Like there's tons of documentation of children in India. There's like this guy he studied like 1,000 different children, and he's able to verify details they provided about families in different villages, that they're like, oh, I was that person in past life. And so he would like check what they told him versus the data, the reality, and like, okay, like this is a match. And this is another thing with science, is often, even in science, so there's spiritual ego, but there's also science ego. And a lot of scientists, they don't want to be proven wrong, because their whole, their reputation or their funding depends on them being right. And so the ego shows up everywhere, whether that's spirituality or science.
I think like confirmation bias is built into humans.
Yeah.
So and that's another thing with the schooling and the kind of questioning things is that I find that, and especially whether you're inside a community or you're living a 9-to-5 life back in your home country, we surround ourselves with people that validate our life choices.
Yeah.
So we're still doing that here. Whether you live back home and you think we're crazy, or you come and join us, either way, you would validate your life choices by doing that, because we're people going, you're doing the right thing because we're doing it too, and if you say we're doing it,
let's do it together. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can apply that to science and everything, really. There's a lot of that going on, but that's a human trait that we all want, really. We're looking for that kind of validation of our lives.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you for going off on that tangent with me, just to continue this conversation that I've been having with mystics and people who have a spiritual side. But I appreciate that, even though you're not interested in having a self-definition as spiritual, you are inclusive, and you love humans, and you love people, and you have this sense of like community and wanting to be of service. And I think that's the ultimate spirituality.
Yes.
So, yeah. All right.
Thank you.